Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with transformational leadership coach and a former Navy veteran helicopter pilot, Walt Morgan. Walt, thanks for joining me today.
Hey Dan, it is such a treat to be here today with you. Thank you for inviting me. And I also share that I'm a little bit envious of your lifestyle. I think it was about 2019. I was going to sell the house, sell everything, and buy an earth roamer. I don't know if you know what an earth roamer is, but it's these
Hmm.
like magnificent off-road RVs.
Yeah.
And I remember asking my wife, I'm like, so what percentage are you in on this plan right now? Like right now, where are you? And she said 60%. I'm like, yes, I got her. This is going to happen. We haven't embraced the nomadic lifestyle yet. I'm sure we will at some point, but I'm quite envious of this exciting journey that you're on. And thank you again for having me.
No doubt. Well, your wife was 60% higher being in on it than my wife was when I first rolled the idea past her. So there's definitely hope that you guys will embark on the nomadic journey somewhere in the future for sure. So I'll it'll be cool if you do that. Maybe we'll hook up at a campground somewhere down the road.
I love that idea.
So, but before we get started, just introduce yourself in your own words. Who is Walt today?
Who is Walt today? Walt is, I am somebody who's really intentional about my own growth and development, somebody who's very fortunate and grateful to find myself in a position in life where I'm able to serve others wholeheartedly, to support them in their journeys, even as I continue on mine.
Love that. I love that. So, I love you're kind of in the second chapter of your life here. Again, as I mentioned early on, you were a Navy helicopter pilot in your first chapter. And then at some point along there, you figured that you would spend your entire life flying. And somewhere along the line that changed, which I found, you know, somewhat ironic because similar to my path where, I thought I'd be on a baseball field my whole life and then something changed. So tell me a little bit about that journey for you and going through, the process of closing one chapter and starting a new one.
Yeah, I think an important part of that story is how attached I was to being a helicopter pilot, how critical and central that was in my life. When I was in kindergarten, 5 years old, my kindergarten teacher, Miss Burka, shout out to Miss Burka if she's listening, um, asked all of us, the class, to draw a picture of what we wanted to be when we grew up, and then she helped us write the words to that. And I drew a picture of a helicopter. This is 5 years old, and wrote, "When I grow up, I want to be a helicopter pilot." And for whatever reason, my mom framed that, and it hung in my room. Like there's probably various iterations of what I wanted to be when I grew up. But for whatever reason, I drew that picture when I was 5, and it's still hanging in my childhood room on the ranch in Oregon where I grew up. So has really that like this was an early manifestation of being a helicopter pilot. And then as I got older and went to college, I was on a Navy scholarship, and you reach that moment like where the Navy says, well, what do you want to do? We may or may not oblige you, but what do you want to do? I want to be a pilot. So they sent me to flight school. But even in flight school, you don't know what you're going to fly. And, I went during a jet draft. They were turning us all into jet pilots if we had the grades, and I had pretty good grades. And I remember during that time I saw Forrest Gump, and there's a scene in Forrest Gump in which they first get to Vietnam, and Huey comes in and does a no hover landing. It's a pretty good no hover landing, but I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen at the time. And I'm like, oh, that's right. I'm supposed to be a helicopter pilot. I'm not supposed to be a jet pilot. This is what I'm supposed to do. I remember this now. And from that moment on, I was committed to that idea through flight school. And of course, was given the chance to fly helicopters and did that for a 23-year career. Just loved it. It was more than I could have ever hoped for as far as being in the world, experiencing the world, having fun. There's an element of service to it, which is important also. So I loved it. And I did, as you noted, think I would do that forever. I had a lot of identity wrapped up around that. But the Navy, in its funny way, for my final 4 years of active duty, sent me to the University of Colorado, which is also my alma mater, and said, all right, you're going to be the executive officer there, which means you're going to run a leadership development program for Navy and Marine Corps aspiring officers. And you're also going to be an associate professor teaching leadership and management. Fantastic. So I started, Dan, I thought I had leadership figured out at that point. As a commander in the United States Navy, I'd been given teams of various sizes in ambiguous environments, and we'd always met mission. I was kind to people, I feel. I built strong relationships. I invested in people. I'm like, all right, I've got this leadership thing wired. As I stepped into the classroom as a professor and began to read more about leadership and teach leadership and understand leadership in new ways, I realized I didn't know anything about leadership. And by the way, that's a journey that started 12 years ago. I still don't know anything about leadership, and I'm a leadership coach and continue to be a leadership professor. The more I learn, the more the subject opens up and becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And so, which is exciting to me. Um, so that was an important moment for me where I'm like, okay, leadership and the subject around it is something that I should probably approach with a little bit more humility and openness and willingness to learn. And that was exciting for me. And I really loved joining other people in their discovery and exploration of leadership as well. So I love that. So after I'd done that for 4 years, I was at that moment like, wow, I've been in the Navy for 23 years. Is it time to retire, or is it time to take that attache job in Fiji? My wife's a little upset that I chose retirement over Fiji, but it felt like it was time. It felt like something was opening up, and I wasn't sure what. So I retired, um, and I was at a crossroads. I think every separating veteran is at a crossroads, and the crossroads is: do I go to the place where everyone knows who I am? Do I go to the airlines? That's what a lot of my squadron mates are doing. They're flying
Mm.
in the airlines. Do I go into defense contracting consulting? A lot of my squadron mates are doing that also. But the other path is, do I go someplace where nobody knows who I am and start over
Yeah.
as a beginner with humility, which was, by the way, the path I chose, but it was a lot harder than I thought it would be in a lot of ways, to just even the humility part, right? To move from Commander Morgan to hey, new guy, right? That was something to overcome, and I have, and I'm better for it. So so I took that path, but there was something else. There was this voice, this nudge from the universe, this idea that my future was something in leadership development. And of course, those seeds had been planted as a professor at the University of Colorado teaching leadership. By the way, 12 years later, I still teach leadership classes at the University of Colorado. That part of my life hasn't ended. Um, I'm like, it's something about leadership development. So I changed my LinkedIn profile to say leadership development specialist, waited for the job offers to roll in. They did not. Um, so, so that in itself was a journey also. I remember I talked to one recruiter after I didn't get an interview for a job that I wanted, didn't even get an interview. So I circled back to her. I'm like, hey, help me grow from this experience, help me learn, help me understand. And she said, yeah, so this is a leadership development position. And you were in the military where there is no leadership. So it didn't feel like a good fit to us. Okay. Thank,
Huh.
thank you for explaining that to me. Um, and I will say that the context of leadership in corporate America, I soon learned, was considerably different than the military. She wasn't entirely wrong, but she was pretty wrong, I think. So um, I did eventually get a job with a Fortune 200 healthcare company, and they were remarkable. They had the most remarkable culture. They were so intentional around their culture. I like DaVita is the name of the company. So I like to say that the only organization I've ever witnessed that's as intentional about their culture as DaVita is the United States Marine Corps. Right now, it turns out it's a very different culture. The culture of, killing people is quite different than the culture of not killing people, right?
Right.
Different cultures, but the intentionality around that culture
Right.
was the same. And their culture was very is very emotional, it's very spiritual, it's mostly like it's very heart centric. And so what happened next is I realized that for decades, forever, I had neglected my emotional self. I neglected my spiritual self. And so I went on another steep journey and continue to be on it around my how I show up, my emotional awareness, my emotional management, my emotional connection, my emotional being, and also more broadly my spiritual self. And I don't mean that in a religious sense. I mean that in my sense of connectedness to everything is so much more pronounced and powerful, and I have so much more awareness of it. So that was a corporate journey I went on. Like who in this world goes to a Fortune 200 corporate healthcare company and gets to say, yeah, it led me on this important emotional and spiritual journey. But that's what happened to me. And I was with them for over 3 years. But during that time, I became trained and certified as an integral coach. And that for me became very, very clear that that was the next step in my journey to serve in that way as an integral coach to support others one-on-one primarily in their journeys. And I've been doing that now for 4.5 years.
Wow. So tell me a little bit about that emotional and spiritual journey that that you went on that led you to where you are now.
Yeah, it is. One, thank you for that question. Um, I'll tell you my first experience with a coach, and and that might kind of lead into the answer we're looking for. But it was March of 2017, and now I was in this new company as a leadership facilitator. That was my role. And I was about to go into a program, and I had to get into what's called shadow work. And it's not important for your audience, but it's the deep layers of beliefs that lie underneath our behaviors. And I was about to go into this corporate program and hold this space in which we were going to explore our shadows, which is deep, deep work. And and I didn't think I had it. I didn't think I was credible in that work. So I went to one of my peers, who's a dear friend now, and she was a certified coach at the time already. I wasn't at that time. And I said, okay, the shadow work. I got to go into this program. I have to do shadow work. I don't feel credible. I'm a little concerned about this. So maybe you could help me with my own shadow work. And I already have a topic. It's about my road rage. And and so I'm ready to go. She said, okay, great, Walt. I'm willing to do this with you. How long do you have? I said, 5 minutes. And she's like, Walt. I'm like, 5 minutes, let's do this. So, in 5 minutes, what this very skilled coach was able to do for me was to eliminate my emotional source of my road rage, which is very pronounced. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say this now, especially like, when I think about how I show up in the world now, um, with I feel so much control. It makes me sheepish to look back. But I was like getting on fights on the side of the road kind of road rage. Like I was the
Wow.
extreme kind. Um, I'm pleased to say I haven't had even an inkling of road rage since that day. That's how powerful that 5 minute conversation was.
Wow.
She helped me illuminate my need for respect and the source of my need for respect and how that was being challenged in events that manifested itself in road rage. She was able to do that for me in 5 minutes. And the gift that she gave me was emotional awareness and emotional control in that situation and a relationship, just a relationship with my emotions. I'd say that was probably a critical moment in that emotional journey where now I just have this increasing ability to feel and to feel without judgment, to notice what I'm feeling, to manage what I'm feeling, to control what I'm feeling, but to notice it, to just allow myself to feel it. And that has brought so much depth of richness to my own life. Like I'm in the world in 3D now, where I used to be very much in the world in 2 dimensions. And I feel like it will continue to expand and my excitement of being in this world and feeling will only increase over time. And that's really correlated to that spiritual journey that you asked about also. Like I feel so connected to all of it. Like I feel so much like I am a piece, a humble part of something that's beautiful and powerful and surrounds me. And I'm in it and I feel it so much of the time. And that's also adding depth and richness to my life and my my joy and purpose and sense of value in this world. So they kind of work together. They continue to grow.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Yeah, I mean it's, life is always a constant journey and we're always, we're always evolving, we're always changing. Um, I think we're taught in our society that we're supposed to make this lifelong decision at 18 years old. And that's really not the case. And I think you and I are both testaments to that, I was in a 30-year career of running a youth nonprofit sports organization and decided to, open a new chapter. I resisted it at first. I resisted that voice initially because I loved what I was doing. You were in a, 23-year career and, decided to, you know, turn a new page and start a new chapter as well. Talk a little bit about, just the ability to shift, that it's okay at any age to start a new chapter, whether that's, you're in a career for 5 years and decide, what, I want to go down this path because, we are always evolving. So, what we were 5, 10, certainly 30 years ago isn't what we are today.
Yeah, I'd say there's two kinds of shifts in that. There's the contextual shift, right? What is going to be different in my my life, my family, my friends, my location, my job, my level of job, my hobbies, my like what is going to change in my context and how do I allow that to change, or how can I be intentional around what I change and what I don't change, what I control and don't control, right? So the context is one thing, but the other parallel evolution that's going on is us, right? And how we show up in that context and how we continue to grow and learn to show up differently in that context, often better in that context. So both those things have choice around them, and both those things lack choice. But, you said that we all grow. I'm not sure that's true. I feel like I know people that don't grow
Mhm.
in both context, emotionally, spiritually, and outlook. I feel like some have regressed. So I would say that focusing on the self part of these things, like our journey is a different one when we're intentional about it. I choose to grow. I choose to evolve. I choose to be better, to show up better, to show up differently, to have more freedom in how I show up. So I just don't always show up the same way, but have more opportunities. But that's a choice we have to make. And if we don't make that choice, well, I think we'll be pretty limited in our growth. You've been very intentional around it. You've listened, you've felt, you've been called, you've responded to the call, you grow, you do this podcast, you do a lot of other things that makes a powerful difference in this world. That's a choice. So I think the first thing is the invitation just to make that choice, to make this that choice to be a human on a journey, to be open to that possibility.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the fact that you kind of, you know, pointed out and drove the point home that it's a choice because, a lot of times you hear people, I don't have a choice in this, and I think we always have a choice. We may not have like things happen to us that we don't have control over, but we
Mhm.
always have control over the choice of how we react to them, whether
Yeah.
positively or negatively. So, you know, where in your journey did you realize that you had a lot more power over the choices and decisions that you had to, in order to make you, you know, more happy and more intentional? Um, was there a specific
Mm.
moment or, how did you realize, no, this is my choice to do this and to be intentional?
Wow. You're asking such great questions today, Dan. Uh, you really have me thinking on that because I think there's the illusion of choice and there's real choice. Um, and I think I've long had the illusion of choice. I've long believed I can do what I want in this world, probably more than the reality, even, right? Like I'm just gonna make this world my playground, and I feel capable of doing that. Um, so that illusion of choice was there for a long time. Real freedom of choice is about I I think it's about the ability to overcome fear, to name our fears and to move through them. Like, I'm afraid if I do this right thing, I will lose this. I'm afraid of the pain that lies on the other side. And if I'm being honest, I don't feel like, I think I'm existing in my journey, now that you asked this question, somewhere between the illusion of choice and the awareness of the illusion of choice, but I haven't fully pushed through. That's still part of my journey to learn. That's the brilliant Chris Christopherson lyric sung best by Janis Joplin. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose.
Yeah.
Like, how do we get to that the philosopher Epictetus, like how do we get to that place of the thing that we truly control is ourself and the faith that we can show up in our own truth and our own values. So going far deeper than I ever imagined it was going to go at the start of this podcast, Dan. You're doing such a great job of leading this conversation. Um, but yeah, the freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose.
I love that
I think
song.
sums it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very cool. And, you know, earlier in the conversation, just talked about, um, one thing for us in our RV journey is, we've become so much more mindful of the moment that we're in, and not getting too far ahead of ourselves. I mean, obviously, yeah, we do plan, we're doing a book tour and we know where we're going to be at for X amount of weeks ahead and stuff like that. But um, just recently, while we are here in Arizona, I reconnected with a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in almost 35 years. And, we spent Easter with him and his family and just, we're very intentional about being in that moment and connecting. And I think that's something that we often lose sight of. We're so caught up in planning ahead, whether it's tomorrow or, you know, next week or next year or whatever the case is, and having these long-term plans that we kind of forget about what's right in front of us. And I know before we started recording, we talked about this a little bit about long-term goals compared to really embracing the moment that we're in. So for the audience, let's kind of dig a little bit deeper into that. The difference between you know being able to shift and being in the moment and understanding what's happening right now, as opposed to always focusing on what's ahead. Because truly, we really only do have the moment that we're in right now. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes, and certainly not in the next 5 years.
Yeah. So I think it is a balance of being present now in so many ways. Like, as you noted, this moment is the gift that's given to us. This moment. How am I going to be in this moment? What am I going to do in this moment? How am I going to connect in this moment? What's the difference I'm going to make in this moment? But also the feeling of it, the awareness of it, the connection to it is something that I've been very intentional about training myself to do, to feel my feet on the earth, to feel my connection to all things, to notice my breath often, to see, to feel. So that's the moment that we're in. How do we parlay our awareness of this moment that we're in to a path that creates impact in this world? By the way, my personal belief is impact is how leadership's measured. I'm a leadership coach, I'm a leadership professor. I serve on several leadership committees and boards. Like, leadership is what I do. And so, how can we be in the moment and also make impact through a path that we take? And I think it's a both and. I think those things exist together. Um, there's a danger in rigidity of goals, I believe. If this is the only goal, and it's, gosh, even that's not a bad thing, in the sense of, look, you are a professional football team and you want to win a Super Bowl. I hope that you're very rigid in your goal and you can attach each and every moment to that goal. And there's a danger in the rigidity of the goals, because if you're so focused on a specific outcome, then you might not hear the calling. You might not hear, you might be too rigid. It might drown out what's in the present. So I don't think this is a wishy-washy answer. I think this is a nuanced and complex answer, which is they both work together. Being in the moment and also listening to where that moment is pulling to you and to the purpose, right? Because what is naming the purpose is different than having a, a too rigid goal, right? My purpose is to serve the leadership development of others so that we can create a shared leadership capacity that allows us to deal with real issues that we face as a species, as a planet, right? Like that's my purpose. How that looks in a year or 5 years, if I'm in the moment, I can allow that to evolve so that I can create my most impact, right? Be in the moment, listen, know what your purpose is, have goals, but hold them loosely
Yeah.
would would be my answer.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. So, again, I come from a, athletic coaching background. And, you know, one thing I've found throughout the years is that, I always took on the philosophy of not just teaching the X's and O's of the game. It was always really about teaching life lessons. Um, so I really truly believe that, I was more than a coach. I was really a leader. They just, young men and women that I was coaching. But there is a difference between leadership and coaching, um, because not all coaches are really great leaders. Tell me what you think about that.
I think one, I think it's important to make a differentiation between sports coaching and leadership coaching, or any of the variants of human coaching. You know, I'm an executive coach, I'm a leadership coach, I'm a human coach. I and I have a very broad network of coaches that all fall in that human coaching realm. And I think one place that it's a little bit different than sport, in a lot of ways, it's the same. But one of the places that it's different is as a sports coach, you're an expert in the game. You're the expert in the techniques in the game. You have wisdom and experience to share and direct. In the other human coaching variants, this is about people's lives. They're the experts in their game. They are the experts. So instead of teaching things, a good coach allows them to discover things that they wouldn't have discovered if the coach wasn't there. So it's continually setting a space, a container, a construct in which our clients are like, there's something about me. There's something about my context. There's something about how I show up. This is where it comes from. And by the way, I'm a very outcome based coach. Like at the end of this 6 month program, this is, what would you like to be able to do better? Why is that important to you? What would that make possible in your life, in your job, in your relationships, in your productivity, in your focus, or whatever, if you could do that? Okay, that's what we're going to work on for 6 months. But man, I would say telling my clients things is less than 10%, right? It's 90% creativity and discovery. Um, and so, in that perspective, I feel like everything I do as a coach is leadership. And the reason I say that goes back to how I define leadership. I define leader, and this is my definition. This doesn't have to be anybody else's definition, but this is mine. Uh, Leadership is the process of turning our best intentions into impact. So let's think about that. Our best intentions, that means we have to know our best intentions. Like a lot of my clients don't until we explore that. what are your best intentions? What is your purpose? What are your values? What is important to you? What is the difference you want to make? The best difference you want to make. Those are your intentions. Okay. Now, what is the process that you use to create impact? Well, usually something will be could be better in the process itself, right? Like I they could create better relationships, more trusting relationships. They can rely on their instincts more. They can listen to others better. They can sacrifice their need to be right. I no client, none of my clients has ever had the same topic. It's always unique to them.
Right.
But whatever it is, Dan, is getting in the way of their impact. Whatever it is getting in the way of their best intentions making an impact in this world. So that's leadership to me. As long as I can help my clients turn their intentions into impact. And guess what? Like most of my clients are VPs, senior VPs, C suite, directors, senior directors, whatever. Most of them come to me. Like I'd say 80% come to me in paid for by their corporate sponsor. Another 20% just find me and pay me out of pocket. I love them, right? I love those clients, but I love all my clients. But the business says, okay, we want our VP to be better. I'm like, okay. So then I work with the VP. I'm like, hey, like, what's important to you? What's getting in your way? And whatever is getting in their way is also getting in their business's way. And whatever is getting in their way and their business's way is probably also getting in their family's way and getting in, you know, interrupting how they feel and their joy and their harmony and their, stress level and balance, right? So we all have that thing that's most getting in our way right now. We all have it.
Yeah.
What would be possible if we could transcend that?
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I'm going to totally shift gears on you here because this is really more a personal question for me. Um, just because I have this fascination with wanting to ride in a helicopter someday.
Yeah.
I've got, we go by some of these places that are like, hey, helicopter ride, $75, $50, whatever. My wife wants no parts of it, but she's like, hey, just do it. We haven't done it yet, or I haven't done it yet. But um, tell me what like that experience is like, just flying in a helicopter.
Yeah. It's so much fun. I used to view the world as my personal skateboard park. That like I would look at terrain and imagine the ways I could move through it, and my helicopter was a part of me. It's funny. I used to. I'm not tall, but in the helicopter, I used to sit all the way down and all the way back below the glare shield just to be in it because it was such an extension of my joy and my will and my excitement and my playfulness. And so uh, we used to say to hover is divine, right? To the ability to transition into and out of hover is unique and joyful. But I would add the way that my community in the Navy flew helicopters in the shipboard environment was was sideways and backwards as much as it was forward. So I would say not only is to hover is it divine to hover, but it's truly freeing to be able to fly sideways and backwards and to move with fluidity in all directions. Um, so to me, it's just an inherently and uniquely playful flying machine. So obviously I get excited about it. I loved flying helicopters so much. I was passionate. We all in my squadrons. we all loved flying, but I would like to think that if you asked any of my squadron mates from over the years, they would have told you that I was the most joyful when it came to flying.
I love it. Do you still fly now at all?
I don't. I think I'm ready to go back. I needed to remember when I said that I had a lot of identity invested in flying. It was getting in the way. I think my love of flying was getting in the way of um, me and knowing who I am and my ability to move into that new career. So I needed to. I found it useful to separate from flying
Hmm.
and to build a relationship with Walt, not the pilot. Um, and that's been really useful. And I think I'm ready to go back to flying now. I have one of my best friends in the world he's gone back, but he does these he's fixed wing now. He was a helicopter, we were helicopter pilots together. Now he flies fixed wings, but he does these like really short runways in the woods. And it's just like this playful exploration of going out in the world. And he does aerobatics and these things. I'm like, yeah, I think that sounds like fun. I think I'm ready to go back and do that.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. We definitely lit up when you started talking about flying, and
Yeah.
I think that that actually unintentionally created a point that, even when, we start these new chapters, it doesn't mean we didn't love our old chapter, because
Oh, yeah.
we start talking baseball and I'm going to light up the same way you just talked about flying. So it's not like a lot of times I think when people think about or consider starting a new chapter, they think it's because they hate the one they're in, or they don't want to be in the one that they're in. But that's not the case. Like, you can love what you're doing and then still, start a new chapter and, flourish in that chapter and still love what you did, and that's where, I certainly think both of us are at this point in our lives.
That's so wise, Dan. That is so wise. The gift that I would wish for everyone is that they end a chapter that they love and start a new chapter that they also love.
Yeah.
Right? It's what a gift to be able to leave something that we loved and find something new that we love, and to have both of those things. And I had that's something I had to go through also. Like I didn't know. It took me a long time to build that productive narrative around my career that was useful for me. You articulated it much better than I am, so I'll default to your view on that.
I love it. So, while we covered a whole lot of different space here, is there anything that you think we missed that would be valuable to the listeners before we wrap things up?
No, I think I've really enjoyed our conversation, and the invitation to be intentional in your growth and your development as a human is something that I would offer to everybody. Um, and I think that's the only thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, thank you. Um, so, how do people reach out to you if they want to find you on the internet, if they want to engage you in any of your coaching services or leadership services? How do they find you?
Yeah, I'd love to support any member of your audience in their growth and development as a human, as a leader. Um, Welcome to reach out to me directly via email. It's the easiest way, which is Walt, WALT, at tliftcoaching.com. That's the letter T, LIFT coaching.com. Um, and you can also go to my website. There's a contact page there. My website is tliftcoaching.com. Again, the letter T, LIFT coaching.com. And then you can learn more about my approach to coaching um, on my website, and you can reach me from there as well.
Excellent. So, Walt, that brings us to our final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. What's one of the little things that Walt does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place?
Yeah, I'm really intentional about my food, what I consume. And that has, I think, a lot of, if many little people were intentional about what they consumed, it would have an enormous impact. I understand that eating well is a luxury that I have, and it's not a luxury that everyone has. So I just want to just kind of name that. But there's not enough, there's not enough earth to meet the demand, the rising demand for red meat. And the way that we're raising red meat is, I believe, both unethical and damaging and not sustainable. I still eat red meat, but as a family, there's four of us in our family. As a family, we try to eat red meat only once a week, and we try to raise regeneratively, or we try to eat regeneratively raised red meat, which is means that it's low density, it's in a system that actually is productive for the soil, productive for the earth, usually grass raised and finished for the entire life cycle of the animal. So yeah, I don't really eat much of anything that's processed. I try to be aware of the sustainability of it. I pay more for the food that I eat because I think that there's nothing more important than the food that we eat. It's what connects us to each other. It's what connects us to the planet. It's what brings us health and energy. So if I'm healthier and more energetic, I can be one of the many little people that creates impact in this world. So that's the thing that comes to mind when you ask that question.
Love it. I love it. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's a great conversation. I'm sure the listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this. For those out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com. While you're there, pick up a copy of one of my books. Again, Walt, I really appreciate the time. It was a great conversation.
Dan, you're a great host who asks great questions. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you. You bet.